there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there, and his disciples to the marriage. And when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus said unto him, They have no wine. Jesus saith unto her, Woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come. His mother saith unto the servants, Whatever he saith unto you, do it. And there were set there 6 water pots of stone after the manner of the purifying of the Jews, containing 2 or 3 firkins apiece. Jesus saith unto them, Fill the water pots with water. And they filled them up to the brim. And he saith unto him, Draw out now, and bear unto the governor of the feast. And they bare it. When the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and knew not whence it was, but the servants which drew the water knew. The governor of the feast called the bridegroom, and saith unto him, Every man at the beginning doeth set forth good wine, and when men have well drunk, then that which is worse. But thou hast kept the good wine until now. So, Brother Pope, we're on John chapter 2, and I'm on verse 11. So, continuing on verse 11, this beginning of miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth his glory, and his disciples believed on him. After this, he went down to Capernaum, he and his mother, and his brethren, and his disciples, and they continued there not many days. And I'm ending at verse 12. So when I was actually reading this, it was actually kind of interesting after I, read it like 3 times in a row, trying to figure out what it was about. Because I was like trying to figure out what the miracle was. And, well, starting at verse 1, it says, And the 3rd day there was a marriage in Cana. Well, the 3rd day is referring to 3 days after he was baptized. And I just thought that was kind of interesting, though, that immediately after he gets saved, now just starting his ministry after he's been saved. And Mary, Jesus' earthly mother, and his disciples all went to the wedding. And I actually looked it up. The traditions back then with the wedding feast lasted up to 7 days. So we do it, we have, the main wedding lasts 1 whole day. Then the honeymoon will last maybe 3 or 4 days. That's it. But just the wedding alone took 7 days. Now, I thought that was kind of interesting that we've narrowed it down, but just the time span of this whole feast. And the only 2 drinks that they ever had in Israel at that time, or in Galilee, well, actually, just generally back in the day, or back when the Bible was written, the only 2 things to drink were wine and water. There were some spots in the Bible where it does say that the water wasn't good to drink, so God told, I know in the Old Testament, when the Israelites were going through, they were like, well, we're thirsty. he goes, well, there's some water over there, and they go, we can't drink it because it's bad water. He goes, throw the tree in there, and it'll be clean. So there are some waters that are just dirt, but I'm just thinking, how many people do we normally invite to a wedding? Probably about 30 or 40 people. Well, that's a lot of drinks to be serving, especially for 7 days straight. So it says here in verse 3, and when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus saith unto him, they have no wine. So they've already run out. Jesus saith unto her, woman, well, because see, this is the Jews that are at the wedding. So these aren't these are not Jesus' disciples. These are the other Jews. And, other Jews, a lot of, the unsaved Jews, they don't follow God. Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, we'll get to that point in verse 4. So, verse 3 it says, and they wanted wine, and the mother of Jesus saith unto him, they have no wine. And verse 4 says, Jesus saith unto her, woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come. And what he's actually, when he says woman, he's now just starting his ministry. So he's trying to separate his personal connection, a little bit of a personal connection. He's trying to separate just a little bit away from his mother. And then he turns around and he says, what am I now, what am I supposed to do with you now because of everything else that's going on? And then he says, well, my hour has not yet come, referring to when he will be put on the cross. For the hour before he gets put on the cross. So, that's why he refused to do it to start with, because he goes, mine hour is not yet come. I'm not going to partake of this because I can't. And it says here in verse 5, and his mother saith unto the servants, whatsoever he saith unto you, do it. And that gives you she's basically telling the servants, whoever is, we don't know who's putting who put the marriage or who put the wedding, the feast together and everything, but the people who are, moving, putting food out and all that, she told them, whatever Jesus says, just do it. And that's what we should do in our lives. We are the servants of God. Just do what he says. And it says, whatsoever he says. So that means even if you don't like what he says, You just got to do it. If it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't seem like it's right, you still do it. Yep. Okay, verse 6. And there were set there 6 water pots of stone, so 6 stone pots. The Bible, it doesn't say how big they were or what shape they were. It just says there's 6 pots made out of stones. Okay, and it says, so there's that, and it says, after the manner of the purifying of the Jews, containing 2 or 3 firkins apiece. So, with the Jews, I actually learned this out, their culture said after every course of the meal. So, like some meals, there's like 3 courses, an appetizer, main course, and dessert. After each meal, they rewash. They wash all the plates, they wash everything that they used before they go on to the next course. They wash their hands and they wash their feet again. They're purifying themselves again and again. So this water is going to be nasty. And, these pots are holding about 2 to 3 firkins apiece. And that's about 9 gallons apiece. So 9 gallons a pot. That's about 54 gallons of wine that they would have probably used. That's a lot of, considering how many people there probably were, seems reasonable for amount of drinks. 54 gallons to drink. It says, Jesus saith unto them, fill the water pots with water. And they filled them up to the brim. So they filled it so full, they filled it just to the lip. They left no extra room. So that makes it even more heavier. At least in my opinion. It says, and he saith unto them, draw it out now, and bear unto the governor of the feast. And they bear it. So now they're hauling out that water, that filthy water that all the Jews had pretty much washed their hands with. And, washed their feet, washed their hands, washed all the, all the plates and whatever they used. Hauled all 6 of those to the governor, or the person who is the head of the feast, whoever was the person who was running the feast. Yeah. So they did that. Well, just think about what they're doing. They're trying to make sure, they're trying to get the wine, and they're sending to the governor of the feast dirty water. You just imagine their facial expressions. Why are we sending him the dirty water? We asked for wine, not dirty water. It says, and when the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and knew not whence it came, so he had no idea, because the miracle was taking place during the transportation of those water pots. So, that's just to show kind of God's power. He could do it while they're moving from one spot to the other. He doesn't have to be directly right there changing it. He doesn't have to face the pots. He doesn't have to look at the pots and just change the thing. He can do it whenever he wanted to. But the servants knew exactly what had happened, because they knew what Jesus is capable of doing. And it says, the governor of the feast called the bridegroom, or the man who was getting married. And saith unto him, every man at the beginning doth set forth good wine. So when he's basically saying, at the beginning there was some good wine. And when men have well drunk, so when they've drank it all, that which is worse, but thou hast kept the good wine until now. So it's even better than it was before. This is the beginning of the miracle, or this beginning of miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth his glory, and his disciples believed on him. So just that as the very first miracle that the disciples see, because they've already been called. So this is the very first thing that they've seen. I can just imagine their faces being astonished that he did what he did. It says after this he went down to Capernaum, which is further south in Galilee, and his mother and his brethren, or he and his mother and his brethren and his disciples, and they continued there not many days. So they didn't really stay that long. Because they're going from one place to the next. Or Jesus, he's going from one place to the next place to the next place. Because he's kind of like our first missionary. He never stays in one spot. Because most missionaries nowadays, they go from, if they're, foreign missionary, I know someone who lives down in Chile who's a missionary. They don't just stay in the one town. They move to the different areas of the country to spread the gospel. So that does show that he's not going to stay in one spot for long. So if you have anything you want to add to it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, in verse 4, it does say, he's, Mary's mother, or Jesus' mother, it went over to Jesus in verse 3 and asked, well, we're out of wine. She said, well, we're out of wine. We need more wine. Because she knows that Jesus is the Son of God. He can do all sorts of miracles. He has the power to do stuff that most people are not able to do. Well, then it says here in verse 4, Jesus saith unto her, woman, what have I to do with thee? So he's like, what am I supposed to do? Because now he's puzzled. Or he's like, well, what, he's like, I can't do this. Because he says, mine hour is not yet come, referring to when he's going to be put on the cross. That is the first reference of when he drank from the cup. Because he said the wine is my, the cup is, the cup of wine is my is my blood. That is the first and the only time he ever drank. Because here in verse 4, it proves he didn't drink, because he says, mine hour is not yet come. So he probably drank water. And that's another thing too, is he's supposed to be the Son of God. He doesn't want the wine. And actually, I learned this just for context wise. How they make wine is they put a little bit of yeast in it, and the sugar from the fruit or the yeast eats all that sugar, turns it into alcohol. You got wine. Well, the same I learned in the going through the Lord's Supper. They use unleavened bread for the deal. They don't. The bread doesn't have any yeast in it, because yeast, the leavening agent, is supposed to represent sin. So no unleavened bread means no yeast is in it. So there's no sin. Because it's supposed to be his. He says the bread is my body, so it's supposed to be pure. So there's no sin or no yeast in the bread. Well, that also refers to why he wouldn't drink the wine, because it's got yeast. Yeast was used to make it. Yeast is used to make wine. Well, to make it pure, or yeast as in the bread represents sin, he wouldn't take of it. Because then basically be defiling everything he's for. And that's why we as Christians, I know some people who say they're Christians, they turn around and they say, "Oh, I can drink wine." But if you look at the symbolism behind it, you shouldn't be doing it. And I actually was talking to someone a couple months ago, and they had actually said, "Well, if you're not, because I'm part of a Christian motorcycle group, and one of our people had said, well, you guys can drink wine, or you guys can drink as long as you're not wearing your vest, your colors." And I turned around and I told him, I go, the Bible says, abstain from all appearances of evil. That includes drinking wine. I go, because if you turn around and I'm not wearing the colors and I drink I drink alcohol, I go to one place, I'm wearing my colors, I don't drink, I'm not drinking. Then I turn around and go back without my colors on and I'm drinking. What kind of an example is that? If I'm Christian, supposed to be believing in God, following his instructions, and I'm doing the opposite. Doesn't show a very good example. And that's one thing too about what I grew up, in my family, not drinking any wine or, no alcohol. We won't even allow anything of alcohol in our house. I turned around on my 21st birthday, I had one drink. I regretted that decision. I hated the taste of it. I hated what it was going to do. If I continued, I quit. Just that one little drink, and I quit. Sometimes that's all, what we do is, in our life is we just, and that's one of the things too, why God says not, or to abstain from all appearances of evil. Because look at all these alcoholics. Because they're drinking wine here. Well, they said until they're well drunk, so they're probably a little tipsy now. They're probably, they're really, really drunk by this time. But alcohol, as you said, maybe a little bit wouldn't hurt, but it's the thought of, that one little piece of sin. Oh, I'll just grab a little bit of it, just a smidgen. Then you're like, okay, that wasn't bad. A little bit more, and a little bit more, until you're completely full of, until you've completely gone to sin. Until your life is wasted. Because I know some people who have, they said, oh, I'm going to only have that one drink. Sooner or later, it's 2 or 3 drinks a day. And sooner or later, it's a case. And they just can't get out of it because it's addictive. But it's what sin is. Sin is addictive to our earthly, to our flesh. It's addictive. I know some people who have had trouble with anything. I know my dad still has problems with smoking. He wants to quit, but that addictiveness, even though he's tried to quit, smoking still affects it. It's the same as wine. As soon as you get that little bit, you just can't stop gaining or getting it. Because if you stop getting it, your body's just going to have a fit over it. So, if you want to. Okay, so this is now going to be the first Passover feast since Jesus has been doing his ministry. There's been one other. I don't understand why they titled this section the first Passover, because the first Passover feast was back in when the Israelites were coming out of Egypt. And it says here, verse 13, it says, and the Jews' Passover was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. So he's now going back up the sea, back over to Jerusalem. Yeah. It says, and verse 14, it says, and found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and doves and changers of money sitting. So he's going into God's house, where they're supposed to be worshiping, and he's seeing all these things going on. But then when he had made a scourge of small cords, he drove them out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money, and overthrew the tables. I think that's the very first time I've ever seen God in the Bible physically, as now, of course Jesus is, still God, but in the earthly flesh. I've seen God plenty of times upset at the way the Israelites have acted in the past, but now that he's on the, physical earth, adds a new perspective of getting upset. Because yeah. That's why Jesus was upset, because he's going, why are these people using this as a marketplace and not a house of worship? So he turned around and he threw out, or he forced the sheep out. He made basically a whip, probably, 6 feet long, out of different cords. And he drove the sheep, he drove all the livestock out of there. Now all those farmers and ranchers are having to go run out to go get, gather their animals. Then he turns around and he turns around and he empties all the money bags on the floor. And then he just tosses the tables that they were using. That is upset. He is just upset that they're doing this to his house. It says here in verse 16, it says, and said unto them that sold doves, take these things hence, make not my father's house a house of merchandise. Well, it says here, take these things hence, doves, or take these things hence, make not my father's house a house of merchandise. Well, because doves, are used for sacrifice. They're turning around and they're trying to make a profit off of doing the sacrifices. Because they're supposed to sacrifice every so often. And he turns around and he's going, well, you're selling these doves and you're making money because of this. This is not what sacrificing is supposed to be. You're not supposed to make money off of sacrifice. Because gain is not sacrificing anything. Yep. And it says here in verse 17, and his disciples remembered that it was written, the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up. So the zeal, he's saying that it's just your lust for all this, it's just going to consume you. And it says in verse 18, then answered the Jews and saith unto him, what sign showest thou unto us, seeing that thou doest these things? So he's going, well, what? They're asking him, what sign are you trying to show us? Seeing that thou doest these things. So he's going, well, what sign are you trying to show us? Because we're doing these kind of things. He's showing that he's unpleased with what you guys, what they're doing in the house of God. They're selling animals in the house of God. If they were selling the animals outside the house of God, God would have probably been okay with it. Because it's not defiling the house of God. Here, verse 19, Jesus answered and said unto them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. So he's saying it's defiled. Let's just destroy it, build it up, repurify it. Let's build another temple and purify that temple, and we'll have no more defilement in this temple. It says, then said the Jews, 46 years was this temple in the building, and wilt thou rear it up in 3 days? So they're saying this, the previous temple, the one that he's saying we gotta destroy it, had already been there for 46 years. So they're saying we've already spent all these years with this one temple, we put all this effort into it, and you want to destroy it and rebuild another one in 3 days? Or, 21. It says, but he spake of the temple of his body. Because well, because it's the temple. Because our heart is the temple of God as well. So if you think about it, the church body or the church building, and also our hearts, because our heart is supposed to be the temple of God, it has symbolism. They defiled the actual house of God, the physical building. Well, spiritually, they defiled it in their hearts. They also defiled it, physically and spiritually. And that's what also made him upset. It wasn't just one thing, it was both things. When therefore he was risen from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said unto him, and they believed the scripture and the word which Jesus had said. Now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover and the feast day, many believed in his name when they saw the miracles which he did. So now he's already starting to see people become saved. Because they're already, just that, the previous miracle, was probably the next town over. Now, he's finally seeing people saved because, they believe in him now. It says, but Jesus did not commit himself unto them because he knew all men. So he knew their basic intentions. And needed not that any would testify of man, for he kneweth what was in man, or in men, or man. So he knew exactly what was in their heart. He knew what was going on. They acted like they wanted to get saved, but truthfully they didn't, because he knew exactly what they thought. And this actually goes back to the previous section where we started, because he wouldn't drink the wine. Because as I just, we were just talking about, the temple of God is also in our heart. Our body is a temple of God. We should not defile it. Well, with the wine having the yeast in it, yeast representing sin, we put that in our bodies, it's defiling the house of God, or the temple of God. So that's, that continues on of why we should not be drinking any sort of alcohol, because it defiles our body. Yep. And also, as the intentions, a lot of times I've seen, people, they have like good intentions, but they do it the wrong way. So, and then next week I'll probably end up splitting this one into a two-parter for chapter 3 and 4, because it's actually together. And actually chapter 3 and chapter 4 are actually the same event. Well, Nicodemus was a Pharisee. He was the highest of all the spiritual rulers. And that's interesting, though, thinking about it. Nicodemus, he snuck out of his house in the middle of the night to go find Jesus. He knew exactly right where Jesus was going to be. He hid it out in the middle of the night. And then he gets saved without the rest of his family ever knowing. is that's another thing too, is I've seen time and time again in stories that have been told to me, and even in some movies, someone gets saved, they secretly, without their family knowing, they get saved, their family finds out, and they get shunned for being saved, or having Jesus in their life. So I'm just thinking Nicodemus is probably a little nervous when he starts going to Jesus, asking how he could be saved and everything, because he's sneaking out in the middle of the night to do this. So. Because I've actually seen, there's a story of this the soldier who served in the army. He was out in the Middle East, but he got saved before he went in the military, and he told all of his members of his squadron, or of his squad, I know what my ministry is. I'm going to witness the ISIS members. And ISIS members, is a big terrorist group. They do not like any outsiders. He turned around, of course, he knows what God wants him to do. God wants him to go witness to these people that, are very evil. They want to do all sorts of different bad things. So he turned around, and his squadron, as they were going out on patrol, found an ISIS member. And they captured him. And all of his squad members said, kill him. Because he's already killed his group has killed so many of our guys, we should just give it to him. He goes, no, I'm not going to do that. Took him to the side, took the ISIS member to the side, brought out his Bible, and witnessed to him. And that ISIS member got saved then and there. And then released him back. And set him free. Took the restraints off and let him go. And his guys were like, well, why did you do that? We should have just taken care of him when we had the chance. He goes, no, that is not God's will. A couple days later, they're still on their patrol. They find 5 guys carrying something. They realized they were all ISIS members. And they'd asked, what are you carrying? And they showed what they were carrying. They were carrying pieces of a dead ISIS member. And one of the ISIS members realized who had saved that one guy, the one who had ended up dying. Goes, you're the one who saved him. Because of you and because of him, we're all saved. We all left. But now they're running for their lives. But he goes, because of your faith, instead of just one member being saved, or one ISIS member being saved and leaving, he saved 5. And that's another thing too, is another one was in India. Missionary went over there, and of course, in India, Buddhism is the highest, one of the biggest religions in India. Well, this one missionary, Christian missionary, went over there and he started spreading the gospel. Well, the village chief got so frustrated at him for, witnessing to him, for witnessing to the deal, because, they're Buddhists. They don't believe in God. They were so frustrated at him that they literally turned around and they brought the entire missionary's family to the center of the village And the village chief says, and they have them all tied up, and they go, you either renounce your faith right now, or I'm killing your kids. He goes, nope, I will not renounce my faith. And if you remember the song, No Turning Back, that is the missionary who originally came up with the song. Referring to, he's not going to turn from God. He's not going to turn away. That's what he means by no turning back. I'm not going to turn away from God. I'm going to stay with God. And as he sang the first verse, he didn't write it down or anything, but he had it in his head. And the first thing he did, as he's singing the first verse, he's watching his kids die. Even his wife was telling him to just renounce it. Renounce God and will be spared. He goes, no. God told, I believe in God, and all these things. So he did that, watched his kids be murdered in front of him. The village chief told him again, renounce your faith, or we're going to kill your wife. He goes, I'm not going to renounce my faith. And he sings the second verse of the song as he watches his wife die. He turned around, and the village chief goes, okay, one last chance. Renounce your faith or die. And the third verse is, the world behind me, the cross before me, no turning back. He goes, if I leave this earth, I'm leaving the world behind me. I got the cross headed in front of me. I'm going there. Saying, I'm going to heaven. I'm going to leave the world behind. And he dies. Not a week later, did the village chief go into that hut and find the guy's Bible. He read it in secret. He got saved. He realized then and there he made a big mistake. He then told all of the village people about God, and the whole village got saved because one missionary refused to deny God, like John the Baptist did. He denied, John the Baptist, when the Pharisees had asked him, he answered them, but did not deny God. And that still shows the faith. But just think, they risked everything